And thank you very much, Denise. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. Hello, my name is Gary Abdullah, and welcome to Penn State's 2023 First Gen Student Support Summit. I am the Assistant Dean for Diversity and Inclusion in the Donald P. Bellisario College of Communications. I'm happy to be here to introduce this morning's keynote speaker, Adriana Lacy. I have known Adriana since she was a first-year student at Penn State. Interesting fact, we both met at the College of Education, actually, where she first started off her career at Penn State. She then made a transition to the College of Communications. And some would say I soon thereafter followed her, where we reunited and have been connected ever since. Adriana, based in Boston, Massachusetts, she is a journalist focused on audience engagement and social media strategy and technology. She has worked as a senior associate for audience and growth at Axios, an audience engagement editor at the Los Angeles Times, as well as an audience news assistant at the New York Times, focusing on search engine optimization and social media metrics. Adriana is also the co-founder of Journalism Mentors, an organization dedicated to opening doors in the journalism industry for historically marginalized populations. Her work with Journalism Mentors earned her a spot on the latest Forbes 30 Under 30 list, very prestigious. Adriana obtained her MS in Digital Audience Strategy from Arizona State University. Her research focuses on how news is packaged and delivered in the platform era. She is a proud first-generation alumna of Pennsylvania State University with degrees in African American Studies and journalism. As we welcome Adriana today, please remember to add your questions into the Q&A section of this session in WOVA and engage with fellow attendees in the chat. That having been said, please join me in welcoming Adriana Lacy. Adriana?
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's so great to be here with all of you. I'm really excited to share my journey as a first-generation college student and really provide some tips and really just things to think about for those who are interested in supporting first-generation students at Penn State and beyond. I'll share my screen right now to pull up some slides. My goal today is to really just talk about the power that mentorship has on first-generation students. My goal really is to just kind of show how mentorship has not only influenced my career, but really how, anyone can be a mentor and anyone can really work to support first-generation students. So as Dean Abdullah said, my name is Adriana Lacy. I am a proud 2018 graduate of Penn State. I was really lucky in my undergrad because I got to not only get a degree in journalism, but also African American Studies, which meant I got to be both in the Bellisario College of Communications as well as the College of the Liberal Arts. And one thing I really loved about having both degrees is that I was really exposed to so many different types of classes and studies at Penn State. I got to take, sociology classes, political science classes, journalism classes, as well, of course, my African American Studies classes. And it really opened up a lot of doors for me and really influenced who I am today. I am based in Boston. Right now, I'm the founder of a consulting firm. So what I do is I work with a lot of digital media companies, think about various newsrooms, nonprofits, technology companies, and really help them to grow their digital audiences. So I'm thinking so much about, what are the ways that we can attract new audiences, we can attract younger audiences, and we can attract more diverse audiences. In addition to that work, I work as a lecturer in journalism at Brandeis University, which is a small liberal arts university right outside of Boston. And there I teach social media best practices, as well as just tips for students to really know how to report on diverse communities. I'm also the co-founder of Journalism Mentors, that mentoring program, and I'll talk more about that later on during this presentation. And I really think that's kind of one of the biggest impacts that mentoring has had on me, is the fact that I started my own mentoring program because I see the benefit of it. Since Penn State, I was lucky enough to get a degree from Arizona State University in audience strategy, And my career has taken me to tons of different newsrooms all around the country and so many different roles, as well as my past job, which was at Harvard University. So like so many first generation students, I think that, my background really influenced so much. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and navigating the college system was really difficult. Something that I hear from so many of my peers who are first generation college students is really just that struggle of what it's like to apply for colleges, to fill out the FAFSA and find out all the tax information you need with your parents, figuring out room and board, what meal plan should you get, what classes should you enroll in, and all of those things were really new and really foreign for me. But something that I realized is that having the help and support of my parents was something that was really important to me. Here's a photo of me in my childhood with my father, as well as just some photos of my family and myself on graduation day. But something that I realized with being a first generation college student is really the ability to open doors and make college easier for the next person. That top photo is me with my little brother. Today, he's now a sophomore in college, and he actually goes to Penn State Brandywine. And it's so important, to see his career and see him really thrive in college. And a lot of that is really just, the ability I had to really learn how to navigate the nuances of college and share those thoughts and those findings with him. And when I was in Penn State, I definitely got very involved, and I'm really thankful for all the experiences that I learned at Penn State and really the doors that were opened for me. One of the earliest programs I was actually enrolled in was the Fast Start program ran out of the Alumni Association. And the Fast Start program really worked with first generation college students, first years, and really was a great way to get us acclimated to the university as we were paired with both a faculty mentor as well as an alumni mentor. And this was really great because I got to really better understand just how the landscape of Penn State looked like, and I really got to get so many resources early on. So I think that's really one of the earliest keys to success for first generation college students is making sure that they're immediately plugged in, even before they arrive to campus. I remember the first Fast Start event actually happened before I even enrolled. There was a summer program where I got to meet some fellow students who would be enrolling, and it really just opened the door to so many new friends and just new opportunities that I had no idea I would even have. And on campus, I was very involved with a variety of different things. I started a news media organization called The Underground, where we focused on telling diverse stories, both on campus and beyond. I was also very involved in the athletics. I interned both for the athletic department, did some work with the football team, and also was a sideline reporter. So I really got to see all of the different things that Penn State had to offer. I also was a tour guide with the Student Minority Advisory and Recruitment Team, also known as SMART, for all 4 years of my undergraduate experience. And being able to help recruit and retain minority students at Penn State was something that had a really big effect on me because I think my goal was really to help, make the Penn State experience easier for so many others. Through SMART, which is kind of this bottom right-hand photo that you see, I was able to meet so many other students, so many who had very similar experiences as me, students who it was their first time in a college experience, and being able to have that community early on really impacted my career, as well as just being, involved in my programs, being involved in the College of Education and the College of Communications and even African American Studies really started to create a community for me, and one that was really important to me. And I say all these things to really just kind of get people to understand the very unique challenges that first generation students face. For example, we know that nationally, 89% of low-income first-generation students leave college within 6 years without a degree. I think this is a really troubling statistic when we see it, because we kind of know, how hard it is to even get to college and even to break down those barriers of financial aid and figuring out all of that. And to go through all of that and still be unable to obtain a degree shows, the amount of work that we need to do as a community to really support and uplift first generation college students. Something else that we know is that first generation college students have a very different background than maybe their second or third generation peers. For example, 34% of the population at colleges and universities nationwide are first generation college students. These students are more likely to be different racial or ethnic minorities, and they're often lower income and even sometimes have dependent children. When we look at this, we see a very different experience than maybe another type of group. And it's really important that we create policies and we create support that really focuses on these different experiences that first generation students have. And when I talk to so many folks who are first generation students, I kind of thought about the different things I faced and they faced. And these are 4 big areas that really strike me as important to think about and kind of the complexities of being a first generation college student. The first thing, of course, is financial difficulties. I talked about this earlier, being someone from a low income family, having that limited family support and just really not being able to navigate, the system definitely made it really tough. Working is another big impact that I think more people should think about. For example, I was someone who worked from my first year to graduation the entire time while also balancing my studies, and it is a lot of work. For those who may have the privilege to not be able to work, their experience at a university looks very different. So it's important to think about these financial difficulties that first year, first generation students might face. Another issue is navigating college complexities. The application process, navigating college is very complex and it's very confusing for first generation college students. And being aware that a lot of these students are very unfamiliar with these processes is really important. And there's also cultural barriers. Like I said before, we know that so many first generation college students tend to be people from minority backgrounds. So it is important to think about the cultural barriers that they may face. Feeling isolated, feeling out of place, because this is a very new environment and it's important that we have systems up to support that. And then of course, the pressure to succeed. When you're the first, there's definitely this pressure that you feel to make sure that you do make your family proud and you do focus on those academic responsibilities while also balancing some of the other difficulties like financial and cultural differences. And this is why I think mentorship is so important. Mentors can really play a role in making a lot of the things that I mentioned before much easier for students. So for those of you who are thinking about being a mentor or have mentored or just want to consider mentoring, I think there's so much that mentors can offer. And I think it's important to remember that not all mentorship is just offering, academic help or offering emotional help. There can be so many different things. And I think that's why it's important for students to not only have just one mentor, but a variety of mentors who can help on so many different things. I think a lot of times we see mentorship happening in a form of a more advisory role, helping with personal and academic guidance. These mentors are great to help with course selection or study strategies and really important to succeed. Then there's also mentors who can help more with networking, career development. And this is really important because they start to introduce students to employers and internships and make sure that they do transition out of college with a bright start to their future. And then, of course, there's emotional and social support. I think this is really important and probably one of the most underlooked types of mentorship is really being able to address those feelings of isolation. We know a lot of times first generation students deal with imposter syndrome, feeling like they don't belong. And then, of course, self-confidence and motivation. Sometimes students just need mentors that are cheerleaders, ones who are really helping them to believe in their abilities and really offer them that guidance. So I hope looking at these can kind of make you all realize that, there's no one set way to be a mentor, and there's so many ways that mentors can come alongside students and really help them to achieve their goals. And it's important to remember that mentorship shouldn't just stop once we get to campus. I'm going to kind of show some ways that mentors can really be helpful on campus as well as after a student graduates. On campus, I think it's important that we really work to identify first generation students as much as possible. Having surveys or orientation programs directed specifically for first generation students can be really helpful. As I mentioned with my Fast Start program with the Alumni Association, being able to be plugged into a community of people who have similar experiences as me before I even went to campus made that transition so much easier. It's important to also think about your classroom. How are you making your classroom inclusive and making your classroom a place that people want to be in regardless of their backgrounds? As we know, students have very different learning styles, and it's important that we create education that matches that. As an educator myself, I know how important it is to really foster that community in class. So just making sure that we are thinking about the first generation experience when we're thinking about our class. And then, of course, having more targeted academic and financial resources is very important. As I said before, we know that so many first generation college students come from low income backgrounds. So making sure that we have that financial support as well as that academic support can really help students stay for the long term, as well as more first-gen student organizations. Fast Start was really critical for me, and I think we need more of those programs, in colleges, more of those programs university-wide to really help students get involved and to really just feel like they have community. Community really hits on that social and emotional support I mentioned before that can sometimes be lacking because of different backgrounds. So having sort of organizations together can be really vital. And it's important to remember that mentorship doesn't stop once you graduate. And I think this is something that's really important. Like Dean Abdullah, I still connect with him and I still talk with him and still get advice from him. And I graduated from college a few years ago. And it's important to make sure that we still have that post-graduation support, whether that's mentorship and networking, helping with the job search, or even just working with career services, helping students to get jobs. All of these things are really important. And even alumni mentorship. I hear a lot of alumni kind of say, I still want to be involved and still feel like I have that connection to Penn State. And by being an alumni mentor, that's a great way to achieve that. And something else that's really important to remember is, all of these things are really just, many different ways that people can get involved. I think even if you have an expertise in one or two of these fields, I think that makes you a perfect mentor. I talk to so many early career students who just graduated and they really need that support. And it's so important that you can keep that going as much as possible. And the way that kind of, I started to do a lot of this is by starting this journalism mentors program. When I was an undergrad, I felt really lucky that I got to have a lot of support in journalism. And I realized how hard it was to break into the journalism industry, especially if you didn't go to a top journalism school or you didn't have those mentors or that network already. It made it really impossible to break into the industry. And because I knew that, and I was really lucky with all the mentors that I had, I decided to start a program called Journalism Mentors that really helps to make the entry to journalism much more accessible. I basically asked a bunch of friends and contacts that I had in the journalism industry to essentially see if they'd be willing to be a free mentor to early career college students and student journalists and really just help them. So far, I have over 100 mentors from media organizations all around the country. We have folks at the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Dallas Morning News, folks who work in broadcast or sports, or even more on the more technical side of journalism. And we've had over 1,000 students mentored for free through this program. We were really fortunate that last year, my co-founder and I got a Forbes 30 Under 30 award for our work and really just connecting and fostering this important community. And one thing that's really important to remember is it's important to be very specific about what you can mentor for. With the Journalism Mentors program that I run, all of our mentors really bring a very unique role to mentoring. Even though they could all mentor on breaking into the industry or a resume review, we wanted the advice that they give to be very specific so that we could meet early career students where they are. So for example, Stacy Fernandez, who is one of our mentors, she really focuses on mentoring about the application process and being a Black and Latinx person in a newsroom. Her experience is very specific, and there's a lot of people out there that she could help. We have other mentors who are willing to mentor on navigating the industry as a bilingual reporter or someone who works in sports. So being able to provide very targeted mentoring is very important to ensure that students are getting really all that they could get out of it. And it's important to remember that mentorship can look like so many different things, as I keep mentioning. We have folks here who are really mentoring on those hard skills like a resume review, but people also giving that emotional and social support as well, being able to thrive in a newsroom when you're the only person who looks that way and things like that. So it's important to remember that there are many different ways that you can mentor, and all of them are valid and all of them are really helpful in moving first generation students forward. And it's important to remember that when you mentor, it not only just helps an individual person, but it really impacts a collective. It really impacts the entire community. When we see faculty and staff investing in first generation students, we really start to see the cycle of success, and that extends beyond campus. That extends to students in their first job or even their 50th job. We see that so many first generation graduates who are empowered are more likely to give back and support future students. I know that I'm one of those people. Having been mentored on campus, it really did inspire me to do more with my own mentorship and to really give back. So when we start to invest in first generation students, we start to see that investment really come back tenfold. And I think it's important to remember overall that mentorship really is a collective responsibility. It's something that all of us around the entire Penn State system should think about. The success of first generation college students really is a testament to the supportive network of mentors and allies around our entire university. And by having us be part of this change, we can really help students. So I encourage all of you out there who are in a position to be a mentor to really think about how you can contribute your time, your knowledge, and your resources to support first generation students at Penn State and beyond. And lastly, I just want you all to remember that if you can take action and be a positive force in the lives of students, really do consider doing it. It's important that we really help with mentorship. I see it really as an equitable future that we're providing for the university. So really think about the lasting impact you can have, and would love to talk more in our Q&A session. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful, Adriana. I tried not to tear up as I watched all of this. Having been with you on your journey for a while now, I'm so heavily impressed by you. We have a couple of questions already in the Hoover system, and I wanted to get to you on a couple of different things. We sit here in higher education, and so we know the term first gen student or first generation student. As a student, do you recall being aware of that quote unquote label, the idea of I am a first generation student? Were you aware of that before you came to school, or did it arrive when you transitioned to campus? When did you become aware of that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think for me, it wasn't something I thought about. I think so many people in my community, like their parents hadn't gone to college. So I think this idea of, going to college for the first time was a norm. And I didn't realize it was a very specific thing until I started the application and got messages from Penn State saying, hey, you're first gen, let's get you hooked up in these resources. And that's really when I learned about it.
So that's the interesting thing. When that first became like part of your mental picture, how did that impact you? What did you do with it? What was that for you? What was that like?
Yeah, I think it's a little nerve-wracking. I mean, I think when you read the statistics about the success of first generation college students, you start to realize that the odds really are stacked against you. So I think in many ways, it gave me more motivation to want to really work hard, but it did make me very aware of how my experience was very different than maybe some of my peers.
And so as we're moving forward, some of the questions that somebody asked is, when you're transitioning from high school to college, and maybe you're just being made aware of the idea that you're doing something different than other people, what was the most challenging part of transitioning to a college campus for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think just the whole idea of like leaving your family and your friends and going to this new place was really different. Even for myself, like I'd only been to Penn State, I think once or twice before I enrolled, and it was a very different community. I lived in an urban area. I'd never seen as many trees and cows and things before. But I think it was really difficult just in navigating the sheer size of the university. When we're looking at places like Penn State, where we have a lot of students and a lot going on, it can just be really overwhelming. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I felt.
How did you begin the process of going from big Penn State to making your world a little bit smaller? And a question that we have is how staff can help students make that connection to actual people or to a place rather than just feeling like a number.
Yeah. I think really encouraging students to get involved is important. My graduating class was 27 students. I think my first year class at Penn State was about 8,500 students. So it was I'd never seen that many people in one room before. So it was really tough, but I do remember so many people just encouraging all of us to be involved. I remember someone telling me like, you should be involved in like a social club, you should be involved in like a philanthropic club and some sort of academic club. So I felt my first year like trying to find those three things to really get involved. But I think that encouragement to find like-minded individuals and communities can really help with that assimilation.
And I have to ask now, um, I know some of the pictures that you put up. I know the people in those pictures. And you made me feel old, so I appreciate that. But as I look over them, there are actually some very highly successful people sitting and standing to your left and right. You're in funny poses at the time, but you all are doing well. And I began to think, looking at your pictures, I know how successful some of them are. So you were surrounded by like-minded people. How important do you think that was to your development and your overall success?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was so vital. I had friends who were like academic superstars who are now doing PhD programs. And I think it really was inspiring to see them work really hard, whether that was academically or through sports or through other things, because it really does inspire you. I think we talk so much about how the company you keep is really important. And I think for me, I felt the same way. Almost all of my really close friends that you even saw in those pictures, I talk to daily, if not weekly. And I think it's so important to create that community because they really do start to be a community that help you even post-graduation.
I have a question here, is an interesting one. It says, how can we engage with students who think or feel like they have to do it all on their own? How do we begin to kind of break that wall down?
Yeah, I think it's important to really provide specifics. I think what can be overwhelming, even at a place like Penn State, is that we know that there are a lot of resources out there. But when you're just known that, hey, there's so many things, it's like, well, which one is the one for me? So I think really kind of that targeted support is really important. So asking a student, what are the things that you're struggling with are things that are difficult. And instead of just saying like, here's all the resources, being more specific, like go to this center or get this help. And I think that can really be helpful.
Drilling it down a little bit is very important. What type of classroom activities, you can answer this really from both of your perspectives as a student and as an instructor at a multitude of universities and Ivy League schools and whatnot. What classroom activities are most impactful for you as a first generation student? How did your most supportive professors help support you?
Yeah, I mean, I think even back to how I teach now, something that I always do every semester is do a first day of class survey, which really starts to get students to think about not only, what their name is or what their major is, but I always ask them specific questions like, what do you want to do? Or why are you in this class? Or what are things that teachers don't know about students? Or can I support you during the semester? I think those questions are really great. I also ask students the ways that they like to learn. So asking them, would they rather watch videos? Would they rather do activities? Or do they just want lectures? And being able to understand students' learning styles can really help me to shape lessons. And I think the best best classes that I've attended are ones that use a variety of different types of learning based off of the feedback that the students get, because we know not one class is different. Students learn very differently. So making sure that we're taking the pulse of the class before the semester starts is important.
Question here specifically about Penn State. How can Penn State continue to support you as a champion for first generation students, and specifically to prepare current students for transition to career? So how can Penn State be supportive to you as you continue to champion for first generation students? And thinking about that transition from student to career, how can we be supportive of that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think just, any sort of support helps. I mean, even when I post something on LinkedIn and I see like faculty and staff from Penn State commenting and giving that support, I think even little things like that can be helpful. Checking in on students, getting students involved. I love going back to classes and speaking to students and really just kind of engaging. And I think just knowing that, the door isn't shut once we graduate is a really great way to make sure that all of us can continue to help students.
One of the interesting things, obviously, we're talking about mentorship here. Mentorship is a two-way street. There has to be someone who is willing to mentor, and then there has to be a mentee. One of the undervalued parts of the process sometimes is the concept of being an effective mentee. And you're very good at this, knowing you have multiple mentors and for the different parts of your life and the different scopes of your life. Can you give some practical tips on how a student can gain a mentor, or how they can go about being an effective mentee? Because sometimes people don't understand what that actually means or how to do it.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a question I get a lot. I think we even put like a mentee FAQ on our mentor site because we had that big issue of people just didn't really know how to facilitate that conversation. I think one of the biggest things is communication. I think we see people go and only talk to a mentor when they need a letter of recommendation or when they need something from them. But I think it's so important to make sure that you're keeping that dialogue. Even if it's you identifying a mentor and you meet with them every quarter, or you meet with them every semester, or you send them occasional emails, just making sure that it really is great communication is really important. And I think it's also important to be very direct on what you need mentorship for. I see a lot of people that just say like, I just need help. Like I just need everything. And it's like, we have to really be more intentional about identifying the ways in which a mentor can help. And I think that's a way to make the whole experience beneficial to both parties.
How did you go about, we can take you back to that, like establishing some of your first mentors? Did you walk up to them and say, hey, will you be my mentor? Or was it more of a natural type thing? How did that look for you in operation?
Yeah, it's a really interesting experience because I have had people come up to me and just say like, hey, I need a mentor. But I think for me, I felt like a lot of it happened more organically. I think it's like you go and you talk to someone and you're like, hey, they offer really good advice. I think about you when I speak with you. I'm like, that was really insightful. Like it makes me want to come back and get more information. So I think a lot of times it really can just start organically by like coming to someone with problems or just wanting to talk and just continuing that conversation.
And I had a great question here. We primarily have referenced so far looking at adult or professional mentors, but what role has peer-to-peer mentorship played in supporting yourself as a professional, as a first gen student?
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that because that's something that I think is also really important. In addition to the Fast Start program, in addition to kind of that faculty and alumni mentor, we did do some peer-to-peer mentoring with first generation, first year students with upper class students. And I found that to be really helpful. It's so helpful to kind of know like, this person is currently doing all the things and they kind of have that same experience with you and they can give you really great advice. So I think it's always important to seek out peer mentors because I think they really give you a perspective and an experience that folks who are, more seasons in their career just may not be able to offer. Even with my journalism mentor site, we have some very young students who are mentors on the platform as well, because we do see the value of that peer-to-peer mentorship. And it really does give students more perspective than maybe someone who is more senior can offer.
My last question here as I wrap up. as a potential mentor out there, if you could offer up some do's and some don'ts as it relates to establishing a solid relationship with a first gen student, is it don't even specifically as, hey, maybe not this question or the wording of this thing, of just a couple things that you've picked up on in your experience or whatever you may think.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think thinking of the don'ts, I always say, don't pry unless you're unless you're kind of comfortable. I think a lot of times people start a mentorship relationship and they're like, all right, tell me all your trauma or tell me everything you're going to. And I think it really is a trust thing, just like you get to know a friend or family member, it's important that you really take your time and really just kind of let the relationship grow organically and don't really try to force anything. I would say another thing is to make sure that you are patient. I know we always want to make sure that the mentees are, coming to you whenever they need you, but college is hard and navigating it is hard. And sometimes students just don't have enough time to, be as responsive or communicative to their mentors as they want. So just making sure that we really extend that grace to students is something that's really important.
Adriana, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us today and providing valuable perspective about the first gen experience at Penn State, about mentorship. Um, Once again, as we're wrapping up, we have some great audience feedback today. I have a few important announcements for our summit audience today. If you are viewing this session virtually, we invite you to participate in speed networking to debrief on what you've heard this morning. It is the next session on the agenda and will allow you to connect with other summit attendees. Now, if you are viewing in person, your on-site host will provide further instructions. Lastly, Adriana has agreed to join us again at 10 o'clock hour for an opportunity to engage with her further. That's great. I didn't know that. So thank you all for being with us at this first gen Student Support Summit today. And as always, we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.